Seattle rain wasn't pouring. It was whispering, slithering down the windshield in thin lines like secrets sliding into the dark. Daniel Moore stepped out of the cab, his shoes sinking into the cold pavement, heart pounding for no good reason. He told himself it was just exhaustion from the flight back. Red-eye from Denver, early arrival, no heads up to his wife. But somewhere between the driveway and the porch, light flickering above his door, a thought crawled up his spine. "You weren't supposed to come home tonight?" Something was off. Not loud. Wrong. He turned the key slowly. The house greeted him with silence. No music from the kitchen, no kettle on. Ava always made peppermint tea before bed, left soft jazz on low volume. But tonight, nothing. Not even the scent of her lotion. Just a hallway bathed in dull yellow light and a quiet so complete it sounded rehearsed. Like someone had pressed pause on life itself. Daniel moved carefully through the living room, past the bookshelf he built, past the framed photos of birthdays and Christmases, up the stairs. That's when he heard it. A faint sob. Fragile, raw, male. Coming from the master bedroom. Daniel's hand froze on the doorknob. Inside, the light was on. The air was heavy, and then the door creaked open, just enough for him to see. His son, Caleb Moore, 17, shirtless, barefoot, was kneeling on the floor in the center of the room, holding something in both hands, pressed to his face, Ava's silk nightgown. He was crying, not like a child, but like a man heartbroken beyond repair, whispering the same sentence over and over like a prayer. She should have been mine, not his. Not his. Daniel couldn't breathe, couldn't think. He just watched, frozen, as Caleb lifted his head and looked right at him. And then came the sentence that made time split in two. "She kissed me first." It wasn't a confession. It was a weapon. Daniel staggered back, eyes darting around the room, trying to understand what the hell was happening. That's when he saw the wall, covered in photos. Not just any photos. Photos of Eva, sleeping, showering, laughing in a towel, candid, intimate, terrifyingly close up. They were printed and taped in a jagged collage that covered half the wall behind the bed. These weren't screenshots. They were taken from inside this house, from hidden angles. His stomach turned. Then he saw the cameras. One nestled between the books on the shelf, another tucked behind the bedside lamp. He remembered installing them himself last year after a break-in nearby, to protect her. Caleb stood now, taller somehow, like the act of revealing his obsession had unburdened him. "She smiled at me before she ever looked at you. She told me I was different. She said I made her feel alive." Daniel shook his head. This couldn't be happening. Ava would never, she couldn't have. She was the one who had told him Caleb was acting strange. She'd been locking the bedroom door. She once told Daniel weeks ago, "I feel like someone's watching me." He had blamed it on stress, work, teen hormones. He had ignored her. Now, he wasn't sure she had been afraid. A photo fluttered to the floor. Daniel picked it up with shaking hands. Ava, mid-laugh, looking directly at the camera, not startled, not ashamed, smiling. His pulse pounded in his ears. What if this wasn't one-sided? What if Caleb was telling the truth? What if the past, those months when Eva was tutoring Caleb in algebra, when Daniel barely knew her, was darker than he ever imagined? "She used me," Caleb whispered. "Then she married you." Daniel stared into his son's eyes. He no longer saw a boy. He saw a storm that had been brewing under his own roof. He didn't know who to believe. And that was the most terrifying part. Welcome to Karma Strikes, where obsession is just the beginning, and betrayal wears the face you trust most. If you think this is just a case of teenage infatuation, think again. Because the truth that's coming will make you question every love, every promise, every innocent smile you've ever believed in. Like if this made your blood run cold. Comment if you've ever trusted someone too much. And subscribe now, because the next part of this story, it will destroy everything you thought you knew. He should have left the room, but Daniel stood there long after the air had stilled, long after Caleb's words had slithered into the wallpaper and settled like dust. She kissed me first. The sentence looped like a virus in his blood, and with each repetition, a new layer of memory cracked open. Memories he had never questioned, never truly examined, now demanding a second look. It was never a sudden moment, no single event where things went wrong. It had always been a slow seep, the kind that molds behind the drywall of a home, the kind that kills silently before anyone notices the scent. And now, Daniel felt it all at once, as if time had reversed and dragged him back into every room where he should have paid closer attention. Ava had entered his life on a rainy Thursday afternoon, asking about a vintage Plath edition. She spoke softly, but her words carried weight, like each sentence had been rehearsed, sharpened, as if she had practiced the exact way to look like someone worth trusting. Daniel had offered her coffee, conversation, and by their second encounter she already knew about his divorce. By the third, she'd mentioned teaching, tutoring, mostly math, but also creative writing, and something in the way she avoided eye contact when discussing her past should have stood out, but didn't. It wasn't until weeks into dating that she said, so casually it felt planned, "Funny thing, I used to tutor your son back when he was in middle school." Caleb Moore? Small world, huh? Daniel remembered pausing. Really? You never mentioned that. She smiled. Didn't think it mattered. Back then, it didn't. But now, as he sat on the edge of their bed replaying the soft tremble in her voice, the way her eyes flicked away too fast when she told him it meant nothing, he realized how deeply he had wanted to believe her. Caleb had said nothing more than, "Yeah, she was cool." And Daniel, hungry for healing, had decided that meant harmony. He thought the universe was fixing what it had broken. Instead, it was lining up the pieces for something darker. Eva moved in 6 weeks before they married. She filled the house with softness, lavender oils, antique books, vinyl jazz, but she also brought something unspoken, a stillness that hovered just under the surface. Caleb withdrew, but Daniel called it adjustment. The boy had lost his mother's presence, moved schools, switched houses. Silence was expected, but then there were signs, small, deniable things, that began to gather like mist on a mirror. Caleb started eating dinner only when Eva wasn't home. He lingered by the laundry room where Eva's clothes hung drying. Once Daniel caught him in the hallway, staring at their bedroom door with a look too intent for curiosity. When Daniel cleared his throat, Caleb didn't flinch. He simply turned and walked away, leaving Daniel with a chill that didn't fade for hours. Ava, at first, joked about it. "Teenagers are weird," she'd said. "They stare. They mumble. They brood. It's a rite of passage." But she started locking the bedroom door, stopped leaving her things in shared spaces, and one night, while brushing her teeth, she caught Daniel's eye in the mirror and said softly, "Sometimes I feel like I'm being remembered too hard." He had laughed, not because it was funny, but because it scared him. She didn't elaborate. In the following weeks, strange gaps appeared. Her journal vanished, then reappeared with pages torn. Her perfume, signature, warm, unmistakable, was replaced with something nearly identical, but chemically off. She claimed she switched brands. Daniel believed her until the original bottle reappeared in Caleb's room, tucked behind a row of books, its cap loose, half empty. When Daniel asked him about it, Caleb didn't blink. "She must have left it there," he said, "maybe by accident." His tone was flat, too flat. Ava later insisted she had never been in his room. Her hands trembled as she said it. The cameras they installed after the break-in had started to glitch. Daniel thought it was tech error, until he noticed only the ones near their bedroom had gaps. Hours missing. Nights when Eva swore she heard footsteps. Once, Daniel awoke to the hallway light already on, but no one awake. When he checked the feed, it was blank from 2:06 to 4:31 a.m. Eva began drinking tea at odd hours. She stopped playing music while she cooked. Caleb, meanwhile, became more present, more helpful, more polite. It should have comforted Daniel. Instead, it made his skin crawl. One evening, Daniel arrived home early and found Caleb fixing the dishwasher. Ava stood near, motionless. When Daniel walked in, she flinched. Not visibly, but enough that he noticed. Caleb smiled. "Just helping out." They ate dinner together that night. Conversation was smooth. Too smooth. Caleb asked Ava if she still liked chamomile. She said yes, but didn't meet his eyes. Daniel watched the way she cut her food. Mechanical. Precise. Not once did she look up. Afterward, she said she had a headache and went to bed early. Daniel stood alone in the kitchen, staring at his reflection in the window. He felt like a guest in his own home. And then came the moment he couldn't explain. He entered their room and found the sheets on his side slightly damp. Not sweat, not spilled water, just damp. The air felt disturbed, like someone had been sitting there, waiting. He turned, walked down the hallway, past Caleb's door, and paused. A soft mechanical click whispered from inside, a sound like a phone being locked. Daniel stood there, silent, listening to the slow inhale of the house. He didn't knock. That night, Ava reached for his hand again in the dark. He let her take it, but this time, his fingers didn't close around hers, because something else had. And in the morning, when he followed the whisper of instinct to a drawer in Caleb's room that should have been locked, he found what would change everything. A photo Daniel had never taken, of Ava in their bedroom, sleeping, angle too close, light too intimate. And written on the back, in black ink, was a date that came before their wedding. A date Daniel thought was just another Tuesday. Daniel didn't remember walking back to the bedroom, but there he was, door closed, air stale, his reflection caught mid-breath in the darkened window, as if time itself had bent just enough to trap him inside a scene that had already been written, long before he stepped into it. The photo lay in his hand like evidence from a dream he'd denied too many times. Eva asleep, peaceful, unaware. But it wasn't the softness of her face that haunted him. It was the angle, the intimacy, the knowledge that someone had stood over her while she slept and didn't touch her, didn't wake her, just watched and captured. That kind of stillness isn't love. It's possession. And now that he'd seen it, he couldn't unsee it. Nor could he ignore the date scribbled on the back, 3 weeks before their wedding, before her ring, before the illusion of peace. The drawer it came from wasn't locked. The flash drive beside it wasn't hidden. It was almost as if someone had wanted him to find it, and that terrified him more than anything. Because what kind of monster doesn't hide the blade, only leaves it polished, waiting? He didn't tell Ava. He couldn't. Not yet. She was too calm lately, too rehearsed. And Caleb, God, Caleb was too kind. He made breakfast that morning, told Daniel, "You look tired, Dad," with a smile so soft it scraped like sandpaper. Daniel nodded, thanked him, held the lie between his teeth like glass. He watched Caleb's hands move, measured, clean, precise, like a man building something delicate, something alive. But Daniel saw it now. The grace wasn't innocent. It was studied, practiced, like he'd learned to move through their lives without disturbing the dust, like a ghost that still wanted to be felt. The house, once full of warm noise, had grown silent, not empty, just tense, like the moment before a string snaps. Ava drifted more. Her eyes rarely landed. Her voice dropped an octave when Caleb entered a room. And still, Daniel said nothing. Not when he found her perfume bottle in Caleb's nightstand. Not when he noticed the calendar notification on his own phone, an entry titled, "She Said Yes, First Set," weeks before he proposed. Not even when he opened Eva's iPad and found a note buried in her drafts, one he couldn't stop reading, even when it made his skin crawl. I was weak. That doesn't make him strong. I said stop. He said I didn't mean it. I cried. He said I always cry when I'm happy. There was no name. But Daniel didn't need one, because denial doesn't protect you when the evidence lives in your home. He started recording, not out of suspicion, but survival. A phone hidden in the hallway vent, another behind the piano. For 3 days, he lived like a stranger in his own house, listening to the walls talk when no one thought he was home. And on the 4th night, the walls finally screamed. It was raining. Ava had stayed up late, sipping wine in the living room. Caleb entered, barefoot, voice low. The recorder caught it all, breath for breath, like the house itself had been holding it in. "You used to smile at me," Caleb said, soft as a prayer. Ava didn't answer. "Before him, you said I was your secret." Her glass touched the table, light, trembling. "I was broken," she whispered. "You were a child." "You never said that when you kissed me," Caleb replied, and Daniel's heart stopped. Not skipped, stopped. Ava said, Don't rewrite this." "I'm not," Caleb said. "You are." Then silence. Long. Drowning. "I was grieving," Ava tried. "I was lost." "You were mine," Caleb answered, and that wasn't anger. It was certainty. That's what broke Daniel, the way he said it. Like a fact. Like a promise. Daniel left the recorder running and walked into the cold, bare street with only one thought in his head. How long had I been living with a story I wasn't allowed to read? At dawn, he sat outside Thompson & Associates with the transcript clutched like a weapon. Attorney Kelly Thompson read it once, leaned back, and said, "This isn't just inappropriate. This is dangerous." Daniel nodded, numb. "What do I do?" "We begin with protection," she said. "And then, truth. Legal, psychological, forensic, every angle. This doesn't end clean." He returned home with papers in his coat pocket and guilt in his bloodstream. Ava was setting the table. Caleb was trimming the roses. Their laughter reached the kitchen like a melody, 2 notes off key. Daniel smiled, sat down, ate dinner, said nothing. Because something inside him had changed. The need to scream had gone quiet, replaced by something colder. Calculation. That night, he opened the vents and pulled the phones out, listened again, and one line, buried, soft, but clear, made his veins freeze. Caleb, whispering to himself, alone in his room. He took her from me. But she was never his. Never. Daniel didn't sleep. He didn't speak. He waited. Because when a son claims what isn't his, and a wife forgets what she allowed, the house doesn't crumble. It folds in on itself. And in the dark, karma licks her lips. It didn't begin with confrontation. It began with restraint, the kind that strangles more effectively than rage. After Caleb's whisper, she was never his. Daniel no longer heard silence as absence, but as evidence. The house itself had become a witness, each creak and flicker a tell. So he adapted. Like prey, learning to track its predator. He documented obsessively, framing objects like crime scenes, the perfume bottle in Caleb's drawer still carrying Eva's scent, the flash drive beside it with a single encrypted file labeled October, and the camera logs that suspiciously went dark for hours at a time. Each breadcrumb fed his growing certainty. This wasn't paranoia. This was preparation. He stopped sleeping. Nights were for reviewing, transcribing, aligning timelines between Eva's journal entries and Caleb's behaviors. One note from Eva, buried deep in her iPad drafts, read, "I told him it was a mistake. He smiled, said he forgave me. I never asked for forgiveness. I asked for space. It was not guilt. It was resignation." The attic, a place he hadn't entered in years, revealed more. A chest of notebooks Eva had written over half a decade, chronicling her unraveling sanity. He doesn't knock anymore. He waits outside the door. Sometimes I pretend to sleep so he'll go away. Sometimes I don't have to pretend. Daniel read in the dark until dawn, the words no longer feeling like ink, but blood. By daylight, he became methodical. He installed recorders disguised as chargers, synced them to a secure cloud. One under the dining table, another in the vent behind the washer. The third sewn inside a throw pillow Eva always held close when anxious. Each placement was a quiet rebellion, and still, he said nothing. He ate dinner at the same table as them, feigned laughter, measured silence. When Eva flinched as Caleb passed her wine, Daniel noticed. When Caleb lingered at the hallway entrance after midnight, Daniel watched through the app, recording without blinking. It was on the fourth night that the pillow recorder captured what truth had tried to bury. Caleb, you still wear it? Eva, it's a ring, not a vow. Caleb, then why did you cry when I kissed you the first time? Silence. Then Eva, shaken. Because it was wrong. Caleb, you never said no. Eva, I did. You stopped listening. A scraping sound, then. I only stopped when you started saying yes. Daniel didn't break. He layered it with more. Timeline, location, corroboration. Brought the evidence to Kelly Thompson. Her fingers hovered over the documents longer than her voice. This is no longer just emotional entanglement. This is legal endangerment. We'll file a restraining order, immediate forensic psych evaluation. I want Eva protected. And Caleb removed. Daniel nodded, but beneath his stillness was something darker than grief. Purpose. He returned home that evening not as a husband, but as a sentinel. He let Caleb pass him in the hallway without a glance. He let Eva sit beside him on the couch, pretending nothing cracked. That night, he faked a business trip and checked into a motel 3 blocks away. Watched the house through feeds. At 2:07 a.m. Eva emerged from the bedroom barefoot, eyes glassy, sleepwalking. Caleb followed, silent, close. He stood behind her at the hallway's end and whispered something the microphone didn't catch. Then turned off the light. Daniel froze the frame, printed it, annotated it like evidence. 2 days later, Caleb confronted Eva in the kitchen. Daniel wasn't supposed to hear it, but he did. Caleb, you told him? Eva, I told him enough. Caleb, you were mine before you were his. Eva, I was never yours, I pitied you. The crash of a plate, a sob. Then Caleb's voice, so soft it shattered. I know how this ends. He'll never love you the way I did. Daniel stepped into the room. No shouting. Just 3 words. Go. Now. Upstairs. Caleb froze. Not in fear, but in recognition. He didn't argue. He obeyed. Eva cried. Daniel didn't console her. He couldn't. That night, no one spoke. By morning, Caleb was gone. His room emptied with surgical precision. The security system disabled. Eva found the note first, tucked inside her jewelry box. Daniel read it aloud. You took her from me. Now, I'll take what's yours. The hallway cameras blinked, then went black. This wasn't the beginning of justice. This was the beginning of revenge, and somewhere in the dark, Karma smiled. Because what's coming next isn't a reckoning. It's a revelation. The evidence was stacked, the silence had spoken, and the gavel was already halfway down. The courtroom didn't breathe. Cook County's Superior Courtroom 4A shimmered under fluorescent lights that buzzed like static, as if the walls themselves were anticipating a scream. Daniel sat motionless, not out of calm, but because every muscle had locked into vigilance. Eva, beside him, wasn't trembling anymore. She had passed that stage. Her eyes were hollowed wells, not from weakness, but from how much truth they had already swallowed and refused to let spill. The pews behind them were lined with neighbors, former friends, faces blurred by tension and too many unsaid things. Caleb wasn't there, but his presence crawled under every breath in the room. Judge Meredith Lang, sharp-featured and sharper-minded, surveyed them like a hawk circling a battlefield. She didn't believe in mercy. She believed in consequences. And today, Karma had chosen her bench to strike. "Call your first witness," her voice rang, not loud but heavy. Kelly Thompson rose like a blade. "We call Eva Sterling." Eva walked like a shadow. Each heel click echoed like a countdown. She didn't tremble, but she moved as if her skin no longer belonged to her. Sworn in, she faced the courtroom. "My stepson," she said, voice crisp but cracking beneath the polish, "became obsessed with me. It wasn't sudden. It was slow. At first kindness, then attention, then control." Her voice didn't shake when she said, "He kissed me." But Daniel saw her grip the wooden edge of the stand like it was the only thing anchoring her to earth. "I was afraid, not just of what he'd do, but of what it meant. For my family. For my son. For the man I love." The gallery held its breath. Then came the evidence. Photos, audio, journal entries. Caleb's handwriting curled with devotion and madness. The recordings weren't loud, but they sank like lead. She's not his. She never was. She was mine before she even knew it. Eva looked away, but Daniel didn't. He needed to see the words that had haunted their walls. "Objection?" The defense tried, but the judge didn't budge. Cross-examination came like a limp wave. "Did you ever invite him? Flirt? Lead him on?" Eva only replied, "No, but I hesitated, and that cost me everything." Then Kelly turned. "Your Honor, a surprise witness." A ripple. Jenna Monroe. The name meant nothing to Daniel until the girl entered. Young, fragile in frame but flint-eyed. She sat, sworn in silence. "I met Caleb online. He said he was grieving." A pause. "He said he missed someone who didn't die, but left him. He said she'd return when everyone else was gone." Jenna's voice cracked. "He told me I reminded him of her." Kelly asked, "Did he name her?" Jenna nodded. "Ava." The silence wasn't silence. It was a scream trapped under skin. The court listened to the voice memo. Caleb's whisper, "You'll be mine again, one way or another. He can't protect you from what we are." Judge Lang leaned in. Her words came down like judgment etched in stone. "Custody revoked. Full protection. Federal warrant for Caleb Sterling, effective immediately." The gavel struck, but it wasn't a finish. It was a fracture. Outside, cameras flashed, but Daniel saw none of it. Ava leaned against him, not in love, but collapse. She wasn't healed, just no longer bleeding. But as they reached the car, Daniel's phone buzzed. Unknown number. One image. A photo taken from inside their house, their bedroom. On the pillow was a new note. You can remove me from court, but not from memory. Daniel didn't show Eva. He simply turned off the screen, looked toward the clouds, and for the first time in this entire storm, he smiled, not from peace, but because he knew what came next. The gavel fell, the courtroom emptied, but one chair remained turned toward the door, as if someone was still waiting, watching. And in that stillness, Karma took her seat. The gavel struck, not as a verdict, but as a fracture line splitting the world into before and after. When the crowd dispersed and the marble echoes of the courthouse faded, only one chair remained turned toward the exit, as though Karma herself had paused for one last look before stepping out of the frame. Outside, Chicago's sky collapsed into a rain so thin it seemed woven from the breath of ghosts. Daniel drove in silence. Eva sat beside him, her eyes half open, the city lights slicing across her face like memories refusing to fade. No music, no words, just the hum of tires over wet asphalt and a mutual, unspoken knowing. Something had ended, but nothing had concluded. At home, they didn't step through the front door. They crossed into aftermath. The house was untouched but unrecognizable, like a stage stripped of its cast. The air hung heavy, not with fear, but with anticipation, of the kind that follows silence before a second storm. Daniel reset the alarm system not for safety, but for symbolism. Eva shed her coat like skin, movements mechanical, ghost-like. The refrigerator hummed, the heater clicked. But those domestic sounds only deepened the sense of theatrical stillness, as though the house itself held its breath. That first night, they didn't speak. Daniel watched Eva wander barefoot to the living room, where she stood before a blank canvas, brush in hand, unmoving. It was midnight. It was morning. It was both. When she finally dipped the brush into crimson, it felt like a scream, silent, slow, deliberate. Each stroke was a reckoning. Her silence wasn't void, it was loaded, and Daniel knew. She wasn't painting what happened. She was painting what hadn't yet. In the weeks that followed, healing didn't arrive like sunlight through a window. It came in fragments. Daniel reassembling broken tech pieces from Caleb's discarded room, Ava burning an old nightgown that Caleb once complimented, a shared laugh over burnt toast that turned into an accidental embrace that neither pulled away from. The past didn't dissolve. It rewrote itself, painfully, meticulously. They found pieces of themselves in places they'd abandoned. A coffee shop Eva once avoided, a book Daniel hadn't touched in years. And then there was the gallery. Ava's show reopened under a new title, Resilience, What Survives the Fire. Critics arrived expecting metaphors. They left shaken. The centerpiece? A portrait of a house split in half, one side dark and cracked, the other blistered but bathed in light. Underneath it, a single word. Still. On opening night, Eva gave no speech. She stood before the painting, eyes red but dry as the world stared. Some saw trauma, others saw triumph. Daniel simply saw her. But karma doesn't retire. She lurks, and one morning her presence returned, not with thunder, but with a whisper. A package arrived. No postmark. Inside, a photograph of Eva sleeping, recent, intimate, impossible. The message on the back, you can shut the doors, but I still know where you dream. Daniel didn't wake Eva. He scanned the house, rechecked every lock, reviewed every feed, all clear. But that was the point. Karma never moved like a threat. She moved like a memory, always just behind you. That night, Daniel placed the photo in the fireplace. This time, the flames didn't flicker. They consumed. Ava watched him, eyes steady. "He's still out there," she said. Daniel nodded. "But so are we." Then she took his hand, not as refuge, but as promise. In a motel 2 states away, a man rewound courtroom footage frame by frame. His eyes were hollow, his smile static. He paused not at Ava's testimony, but at Daniel's gaze. The camera caught it, the intensity, the readiness. And then came the glitch, a flicker of red, not on the footage, on the screen, like someone watching the watcher. This wasn't epilogue. This was prophecy. And karma? She doesn't write the end. She writes to be continued. If this shook something inside you, let it settle. Then stand. Because survival isn't about moving on. It's about knowing what still haunts you and walking forward anyway, like share. Comment what you've overcome. Because in the shadows where closure fails, karma still waits.